Our readings from the book of Isaiah. If you remember last week, it was about the crooked ways being made straight. It was about mountains being leveled, about valleys being filled in. It was about a lot of things that would change. The baby and the viper could be together. The cow and the bear could be together. And the images are images that from nature that don't fit. The desert, I know the desert blooms, but they're talking about a full blooming, like a garden. The desert will change. Parched lands today, in today's readings, will be watered. I mean, it's images that don't make sense to us. And then in today's reading from the prophet Isaiah, he goes on to say who the Messiah will be. That anointed one is coming, Isaiah prophesied. And the blind would see, the lame would walk, the deaf would hear, the dead would be raised when that Messiah came. The letter of James today reminds us of the need to be patient with one another. I think the most common sin committed by most of humanity is impatience. Now, I know I've met some really patient people. I don't know how they ever do it, but they do. It's an interesting word, patience. It comes from the Latin patio, and it means to suffer. Suffering. Suffering is what patience means. Well, how does that figure in? That's not the patience I think of. Yes, it is. Impatience, that's not being patient, is an unwillingness to suffer waiting. My favorite, a line, standing in a line for a long time. I don't like suffering a line. Or I know for many of you, and occasionally for me, this one's not too bad for me, drivers who are ahead of me, or who cut us off, or pull out in front of us, or impatience, unwilling to suffer my child, who for some reason can't think like an adult does. I can't reason with my child. What's wrong? And my impatience, your impatience grows. Impatience with God, not willing to suffer that God's not doing what I told him to do about a particular situation. And our impatience grows. Our not suffering grows. And yet, we know, because we are baptized disciples of Jesus, that we have put on both his dying and his rising, his death and his resurrection. As sure as life itself is, we are sure that we are going to suffer. And yet we grow so impatient with one another, with the world, with things out of our control. It makes no sense. And we so frequently do that with one another in our relationships. Can we hope that, like these Advent readings, like the reading of Isaiah last week, the reading of Isaiah this week, Can we hope that maybe, are we supposed to hope that this Messiah who comes can make a difference? So these things that don't seem possible, like being patient instead of impatient, that maybe we really can do that? That it really is possible because the Messiah has already come. When John sends his disciples, John knows who Jesus is. But his disciples are sent to Jesus in the gospel today, so they hear it from the lips of Jesus himself. Are you the Messiah? Because if he is, then change is coming, and change is possible. And Jesus does not say, yes, I am the Messiah, whatever. He describes the Isaiah reading. He describes the Isaiah reading. He says, go tell John what you see and hear. Remember in Isaiah 7 who that was going to be? That person, when they came, would enable the blind to regain their sight, Jesus says. Go tell John what you hear and see. The blind regain sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have the good news preached to them. In other words, I am the Messiah. Those very things that Isaiah foretold are the things that Jesus is doing. He's come. But he's come to help us with whatever in ourselves, not just impatience, but whatever is blind. However you're blind in your relationships with one another, you can't see beyond something or some hurt or pain. Whatever's lame in us that makes our journey sort of limp along, a journey of our life. Whatever is leprous in us that needs cleansing, that we need healed of. Whatever is deaf, that we don't hear the Lord anymore. Sometimes we can't even hear our own family talking to us. Whatever is dead in us while we are still alive. He came to change us. He is the power of God who came. He's alive and living. He's here. He's already come. And he can help us effect these kinds of things in our life. Where a baby and a viper and a bear and an ox, a parched land can flow with water. All things are possible with his grace, if we but open and let him in. One wonderful way is to do what many of you are doing and will do during this season, celebrate the sacrament of reconciliation. But it's even beyond that. It's receiving him in the Eucharist tonight and knowing that you have your Savior physically within you. And he's there to help you with these very things, to help make your heart, your soul, a better place for him to live.